Dominic LeBlanc had a key meeting today in Washington to talk trade with his counterpart, Howard Lutnick. It is on the heels of Ottawa dropping most retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. in a more elbows-down approach meant to revive trade talks. Let's break it down. The recent changes with Jean Charest, member of the Prime Minister's Council on Canada-U.S. Relations. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Mirella.
So axing the retaliatory tariffs and the digital sales tax. Is Ottawa offering too much? Have we lost our leverage now?
Well, I think it's a smart move. At one point, you have to take into account where we are now in our trade relationship with the United States. Prime Minister Carney quite rightfully points out that we probably have the best deal of any other country in the world because of CUSMA. And Mirella, for us, the main objective is to protect CUSMA, to make sure that it survives this round of negotiations, because it is the preferred instrument for trade between Canada, the US, and Mexico. And it's unique. I mean, you know, CUSMA for North America and for the American government is absolutely key in protecting the efficiency of supply chains. So I think it's smart to focus on what is essential and to recognize that, you know, counter tariffs were never a perfect choice. We're in a world of very bad choices in that respect. So I think it's the smart thing to do.
Can Canada protect CUSMA? This is a leader who likes to rip up all kinds of agreements, and we know CUSMA comes out for renegotiation as soon as next year. Can it actually be protected?
Well, there's nothing conventional about negotiating with President Trump. We know that. Absolutely nothing, and it's very unpredictable. That being said, in as much as we can, you know, verify the intentions of the administration, it's pretty much corroborated at every level that the American administration and those who speak on their behalf want to protect CUSMA. Myself, I had a very brief encounter with Secretary Lutnick in Washington, only a few minutes. We were on a TV studio, and this was after April 2nd, and 3 times he referred to the fact that the American administration had chosen to protect CUSMA. And I also believe, Mirella, that there's a very high risk that if CUSMA were to be destroyed or done away with, it would have a very negative impact on the markets in the United States, both the stock market but also in the business community in general, because what CUSMA is really, at the end of the day, it's the most integrated supply chain market in the world. And to undo that would have very grave consequences on the economic efficiency of both the United States, Canada, and of course, Mexico.
Hasn't the U.S. already undone quite a large part of it by now putting duties on some vehicle parts as well as vehicles made in Canada? That is one of the most integrated systems in the trade deal.
You're quite right that the automotive industry is very much the backbone of the industrial relationship between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Now, as things stand now, the Americans have put a 25% tariff on anything that's not American coming in, and we have maintained that, by the way. Prime Minister Carney, just to be very clear, has taken away some counter tariffs on things that were under CUSMA generally, but tariffs on steel, counter tariffs on steel, on aluminum, copper, and autos have remained in place. And so that remains part of our response to what's happening. But in the automotive industry, it's a huge challenge. You know, Canada produces, I think, somewhere in the area of 1.3 million cars a year now. It's probably half of what we were producing 20 years ago. So there's an issue of cost structure that is also incorporated in this discussion. But the logic of this supply chain, to redo it, Mirella, to redo the supply chain for autos, which Donald Trump says he wants to do, would cost billions of dollars and take more than 10 years, 15 years to do.
If the longer-term goal here is to protect CUSMA, is the shorter-term goal for Ottawa then to try and get out of these sectoral tariffs? You mentioned steel and aluminum. Those are two. Is that a possibility? Is that the more immediate goal, perhaps, for the end of the year?
Yes, you put your finger on it. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we stay on the CUSMA as the platform for our economic relationship with both the United States and Mexico. In the meantime, we need to do everything in our power so that the exorbitant and debilitating tariffs on steel and aluminum, and even add to that copper or the derivatives of steel, which they announced a week ago, are addressed. And just take aluminum, for example. It is completely insane what the government of the United States is doing to itself and its own consumers by imposing a 50% tariff. They won't be able to build another aluminum factory until 10 years, and it'll cost tens of billions of dollars. They don't have the energy. They don't have the energy to be able to do this. So it's nonsensical. And so time will help us. Time will also help us in addressing in front of the courts some of the legal basis of the use of these tariffs that the president has invoked under presidential orders. And who knows, we may be in a much better negotiating position in only a few months from now, given the fact that there's a high probability that the courts will invalidate some of the tariffs that President Trump has imposed on us.
Let's talk quickly about Mark Carney's trip to Europe. He's got an agreement with Germany on critical minerals. Is this a resource too long ignored in Canada as far as developing that resource chain?
Well, it has been. When I was Premier of Quebec in 2011, we announced something called Plan Nord, which is a very comprehensive plan to develop the northern, everything above the 49th parallel, including mining resources. And we were coming out of what we call a super cycle at the time in the mining industry, which is very cyclical. And mining is about infrastructure, Mirella. So if we're going to move on mining, and today, if you were to calculate the time between discovering a resource and opening a mine, you're probably talking about 15 to 17 years. So permitting, moving, the time factor here weighs very heavily. I'm very happy with the agreement with Europe. I think it also says something to our American neighbor that there are other options for Canada in its trade and economic relationship with the rest of the world. So this is long overdue, and I'm among those who are very happy that Prime Minister Carney has entered into this relationship with Germany in particular.
Jean Charest, we do have to leave it there with you, sir. Thank you for your time. Mr. Charest is member of the Prime Minister's Council on Canada-U.S. Relations. He's also former Premier of Quebec.